Hi, my name is Eva Maydell and I'm a member of the European Parliament. I am currently working on the Artificial Intelligence Act. It's the first ever law that tends to regulate AI. I'm part of the negotiations team and rapporteur in the Industry and Innovation Committee, so the draftsperson from an industry and innovation perspective of the AI Act. The AI Act was proposed by the European Commission in April 2021. This was before many people were aware of ChatGPT, of DALL-E, and many other groundbreaking innovations. So back then it was presented, then it came to the European Parliament, and we as policymakers started working on our draft. So it took us a year and a half to find a compromise. Upon its initial presentation, the AI Act was looked at from the perspective of civil liberties, and so the main committee in the European Parliament that would look on this file and work on this file was the Civil Liberties Committee. But since we are in a global competition, in a global tech race, we cannot leave behind the component that can enable our industry, the component that can make us more competitive, that could truly revolutionize, but also re-industrialize our industries and help our small and medium companies, startups, scale-ups to grow. And this is where my role comes in. I have been trying to balance this two, to bring that component of growth, of innovation to the AI Act, and hence to the European companies, businesses, and industry as a whole. Right before we concluded our work, there was a political will, and there was also a lot of expectations coming from the European Parliament, because, as I said, that's the first law. We were the first to put pen to paper, so to say. So there was expectation that we would address the so-called generative AI models. And so we did. And it was a very, very tough negotiation of how the text should look. And I do hear criticism of the way the text looks now, but it is a consequences of big compromises and a lot of push from those like myself that thought we need a more balanced approach. So we have addressed generative AI models in order for us to create and try to create some sort of a general principle of how those models should be governed. I call them guardrails because there were a lot of rumors in those negotiating rooms where people would say, well, ChatGPT is a problem and we need to regulate it. So first of all, there's few issues with that. ChatGPT should not be looked in this sort of similar technological breakthroughs as a problem, but they should be also looked as opportunities. And second, we cannot just regulate the so-called next big thing. We need to provide these fundamental principles that whatever the technology is, there will be certain rules according to which it will abide, and they should be also according to our democratic values and perception of how we can continue to forge societal trust, because ultimately those technologies are already transforming societies, but they could only continue to do so if there's trust in society in them. So I believe by putting those provisions, we have indeed tried to bring the AI Act to be more adequate, but we are still negotiating what should the final versions of it look like. A very important point which I have stood by is that this is not a law that applies to every sort of development of AI. I think it has to apply just to the true risk cases and not just to any type of artificial intelligence use or deployment or invention. I think we have seen from the past that policy is always having some sort of a catch-up effect. But I think we have to ask ourselves, what do we want to achieve? What we are currently doing with most of the legislative proposals that are out there, we are trying to fix, so to say, something that has happened in the past. What I would like us to see and to focus perhaps in the next couple of years in the new mandate and term of the Commission, of the Parliament, is trying to think of technologies that will have more of a strategic vision. I have been very fortunate to be one of those draftspersons on the European Chips Act, and I refer to it as a legislation that was more visionary, that is trying to make us more resilient for the long run, better prepared for the long run. And so I would like us to see some of those more strategic legislations that are not just trying to fix something or protect something, but trying to make us more competitive. Look, I mean, I know when you are an elected member of the European Parliament or of any parliament, you're supposed to produce legislation, but I'm very sober about where we are. The amount of legislation we have proposed throughout this term in the past couple of 4 or so years, and also before that, it's a little bit overwhelming to make sense of it. If anything, now it's time to make sense of it, to make sure that it fits like a digital jigsaw together. So first of all, that's our first job, to enforce it, to make sure that companies can comply. Second of all, we cannot do things in silos, and we cannot do things in some sort of an isolated way from the rest of the world. If anything, we need to collaborate with the rest of the world, with the democratic allies and partners that we have out there, to make sure that those rules and guardrails, sometimes even those incentives, are somehow coordinated. Why do I say that? Because I think it has to be the democratic nations that need to be, winning this race in the end, that needs to be leading the race as well and shaping up the way technologies are deployed. So I would like us to see investing more time into this. And finally, what's important is, I think, making sure that we interact more with the private sector, because these are the people that could tell us what they think might be the next technological breakthrough and how we can support them. So a little bit more listening and engaging, and then acting upon these discussions, I think will be instrumental to make sure that Europe could be somewhere at the good pace of the race. Well, as the term of the European institutions is soon coming to an end, we are going to have European elections in 2024. The current aim and timeline is foreseen to conclude negotiations by the end of this year. That might prove a little bit difficult, but for now, hopefully, we are on track. And later on, the Act will start being operational perhaps in 2026, maybe a bit earlier for some companies. But usually what happens with this sort of important legislation is we see companies starting to comply earlier.